This is the real one right here.
What?
There's one. Octane's one.
22 push.
Hey, what's going on, Champ Squad? My name is Vinsanity if you guys are new, and welcome back to another Apex Legends video, of course. So as you guys know, about halfway through each season, I like to take the time to just look at where every legend fits in with the current legend meta, and come up with a tier list where I rank each legend. Every season brings with it its own, set of legend balancing changes that can shift the power hierarchy quite a bit, with the best legends changing from season to season. Today, I'm going to go through all the legends and place them in a tier list based on how I think they match up with the rest of the legends this season. It goes without saying, this is obviously just my opinion, but for each legend I will try my best to explain why I think they belong in a particular tier, and also whether I anticipate them changing as we go into Season 9 with a bunch of potential nerfs and buffs incoming. Alright, so to kick things off, I'm going to start at the very bottom with the D tier legends, or as I should say, the D tier legend. The only D tier legend this season, in my opinion, is Rampart. I don't think this should come as too big a surprise to anybody, but I just think Rampart struggles so much because her kit is built around locking down buildings in a game like Apex that's for the most part kind of run and gun, mobility focused. Her barricades require you to pretty much stay put and hold down a certain area, which just really isn't how Apex is usually played, especially in pubs. Mobility is super important, fights are really dynamic and are always changing, so having to kind of pin yourself down to a single location is just not the way it usually goes. So next up on to C tier legends, we've got Fuse. As the new legend for Season 8 of Apex Legends, Fuse has just been a little bit underwhelming in my opinion, especially compared to Horizon on drop the previous season. I don't think Fuse's kit is too bad, but there's just nothing really all that special about it. His passive ability is probably his best ability in my opinion. Being able to stack 2 grenades per inventory slot is actually very useful, especially given how powerful grenades are in Apex. His ult just isn't that great in my opinion. First off, because it's pretty hard to deploy and trap an enemy in it, and even if you can trap an enemy in it, several legends like Horizon and Loba, just to name a few, can directly avoid his ult with their tacticals. Fuse, if used well, like in the right hand, I think can be pretty solid, but as of right now, I think he's one of the weaker legends in Apex Legends. So next up, we're going to move on to B tier. I know I only had one legend each in C and D tiers, but I think that's just because the legend hierarchy is pretty narrow right now. A lot of the legends in the game are pretty viable. They all fall into that B to S tier range. It's really pick 'em. Any legend can really do pretty well and succeed in this game if in the right hands. So on to the B tier legends. First up, we've got Mirage. Mirage is honestly on the come up in Season 8 in Apex Legends after he got a massive buff where all his decoys now have audible footsteps. I don't know about you guys, but ever since Mirage did get this buff, I've been getting boozled left and right way more than before. I just think for so long, Mirage's decoys were never that convincing because you could always hear the real one and distinguish him from his clones. But now, that's no longer the case. Mirage is finally the effective illusionist he was meant to be, and he's really solid. He also gets his ultimate about every 50 seconds, I believe, which is really quick. You can use it in almost every fight and gives your team a pretty big edge in those gunfights. So joining Mirage in B tier, we've got Revenant. I'm just not a huge fan of Revenant because of what he's done to the high tier ranked meta, especially on King's Canyon. It's incredibly annoying. He kind of breaks the meta with his ultimate, but you just can't deny he's got a pretty solid kit. His ult basically gives your team a free push with no consequences when you guys are in shadow form, and his L1 is also really solid, low-key one of the most lethal in the game. Every time it hits you, it does 10 damage, but it also is incredibly disorienting. Half of your screen's blurred, and you also can't use any of your abilities, so it throws you off a ton. The only drawbacks for Rev is that, his movement's kind of clunky, he's got a big hitbox, and he's kind of easy to hit because he doesn't have the fortified perk, but overall, he's really solid. Also placed in B tier is going to be Loba. Loba's a pretty solid legend in Season 8. She provides your whole team with a ton of utility when it comes to looting. There's so many situations where you're just not able to fully loot up because you get third-partied or whatever, so being able to use Loba's black market can be extremely valuable. She gets your whole team easy loot. She also gets her ultimate back every minute or so you can get it really often. I think her tactical could use a little bit of work because it just takes so long to deploy and get your gun back out, but overall, she's solid B tier in my opinion. So I'm also going to place the next legend, Wattson, in B tier. Wattson got a pretty nice but small buff this season with her passive shield regeneration. She's really great for holding down buildings, especially when it comes to getting good endgame positioning. She's just a really solid defensive legend all around. The only issue with her kit is that She really has no offensive option at all in her arsenal, unlike Caustic, the other key defensive legend who has his gas bomb. She really has no viability in the middle, the heat of a gunfight. So she really is only good for that end game locking down a building situation. I also think the way Caustic can block off doors with his gas canister is a little bit better than Wattson's fences because they don't fully block off the door. You can still open them and they'll break. So she's solid, but I do think she's kind of outmatched by Caustic. So next up, also in B tier, I'm going to put our favorite robot, Pathfinder. While Pathfinder's no longer the absolute beast he used to be, he's actually in a pretty decent spot this season at last. Finally, he got low profile taken off, and with his grapple cooldown being reworked last season, he actually gets his grapple back pretty quickly in most cases, so he feels solid, almost like his old self a little bit. His hitbox is still really big, he's super easy to hit and land shots on, which is probably the biggest drawback on his kit currently, but overall he's pretty solid. He still has one of the best tacticals in the game with his grappler, and I recommend giving him a try now recently if you haven't used him in a while. So also in B tier, I'm going to end up putting Crypto. I actually think Crypto is a really good legend if he's in the right hands, if he's used properly, but I think he's just a legend that's pretty difficult to master, and a lot of people don't know how to use him to his full potential. His drone can provide a ton of team utility, from scouting to recovering banners and respawning teammates, scanning survey beacons, and using his EMP in a fight. Crypto is also a gem in ranked, where his EMP really comes in clutch, especially for third parties. I think if you can get the hang of playing Crypto, he's actually a really solid legend. And finally, the last legend I'm going to place in B tier is Octane. Octane's been on the come up the past few seasons, first getting faster health regeneration and stim speed, and now this season getting a total rework to his jump pad. He feels really smooth overall, he's the fastest legend in Apex, his stray speed is super good, and with the new jump pad mechanic, he's really solid. I'd say very high B tier, maybe low A tier. So moving on to A tier legends, the first legend I'm going to place in A tier is Bangalore. Some people might be thinking I'm being a little too generous to Bangalore, putting her in A tier. She's really perfectly balanced and belongs middle of the pack B tier. But as a Bang main who's put a lot of time into playing this legend, I really do think she belongs in A tier. She has a super solid kit all around. Her double tide passive is the best in the game in my opinion, and it complements her smoke tactical extremely well, making her a very slippery legend that can reposition very quickly, get quick angles on you, and then almost instantly disengage when she's in trouble. She's probably the hardest legend to track when you're going up against her, and she's, in my opinion, the best legend for solo queuing because of her clutch potential. Her speed just allows you to rapidly reposition and isolate players in gunfights, as well as get out of tough situations when you need to. All around, Bangalore is super solid, and for me, she's A tier. So joining Bangalore in A tier is going to be Bloodhound. When I think of an all-around, super reliable legend, Bloodhound comes to mind ahead of anyone else. His whole kit is super solid, and he's the best scouting legend in my opinion by a pretty large margin. Tracking is one of the most important skills in Apex Legends, and Bloodhound takes away the need for careful tracking and does it for you by providing your whole team with the location of each of your enemies. This is super useful for taking away flanks or angles from the enemy team, or showing you if one of the players is kind of pushed up on his own and is isolated that you can push. His ultimate is also basically God mode. He gets scans every 5 seconds or so, and with his increased strafe speed, he's just extremely difficult to bring down. There's a reason Bloodhound is such a staple in high tier ranked, especially on PC, and he's just one of the best legends in Apex currently. Next up in A tier is Wraith. Wraith has just been the queen of Apex for so long, so to see her no longer in S tier may come as a bit of a shock to some people, but the truth is, in my opinion, she's just not as dominant as she used to be. Ever since they changed her phase a couple seasons ago so that it takes much longer to activate, and then took away her Naruto run, it kind of started a downfall for Wraith in my opinion, and then recently her hitbox got expanded, which is another pretty big nerf because she still has low profile. Wraith is still very small, she's hard to hit, she's slippery, and her phase is still a really good tactical, so I do think she's still a good legend, but she's just not the absolute dominant legend she was in the past. So the last legend to join A tier is Caustic. Caustic did get some pretty sizable nerfs this season with his gas doing less damage, but he can still completely block off doors with his gas canisters, and even if the gas does do a little bit less damage, it still slows you down and disorients you so much that it's still really effective. For me, Caustic is still the best defensive legend in the game. His gas bomb ultimate can totally change the outcomes of fights, especially in ranked when you're playing in close quarters, and I think he's still very good and belongs in A tier. So moving on to S tier, the very top of the top in Apex Legends, the first legend we've got is Gibby. Gibby's just an absolute damage sponge. He's so hard to bring down. It's basically like having an extra player on your team. He's by far the best 1v1 legend in the game, despite his huge hitbox, because he gets additional health with his gun shield and also takes reduced incoming damage with his fortified perk. His bubble tactical is also top 3 in the game in my opinion. It provides your team with on-the-go instant cover as well as quick reses, and you'll basically see every team in top tier ranked on PC especially running a Gibby, but also on console. He's just someone you really can't replace. He's so useful, he provides your team with so much utility, and makes any team a lot better. He's that good. So he's S tier for me. So next up in S tier, we've got Lifeline. Some people might disagree with me here and just call Lifeline annoying, but in my opinion, once they modified her kit to give her auto res, she was elevated to S tier status. A good Lifeline that always goes down last, staying at the heels of her teammates and instantly dropping res if one of them goes down, is one of the most useful additions to any team. Every time she drops a res shield, she forces the opposing team to make a decision, either to ape the fight or stay back and let your teammate get back up on his feet. A good Lifeline who knows how to play her cover, provided by the res shield, is just so hard to take down, especially if she's running a shotgun or something like a Spitfire that has a big mag and really good hipfire. Overall, Lifeline, if used by a really good player, I do think there's a skill cap to using her, is one of the top legends and belongs in S tier. So last, but certainly not least, at the very top of S tier is Horizon. Horizon's just stupid broken in Apex Legends Season 8. After I used her a bit last season to get Masters, I realized firsthand just how insanely overpowered she is. Whenever you take her lift, if you airstrafe, you can absolutely beam people with an R301 or a Spitfire and take little to no damage in return, because you just move so quickly while you're strafing through the air. Her lift also can provide your whole team with instant high ground. You can basically get whatever positioning you want, and it's much better and less risky than taking like a Pathfinder zipline or an Octane jump pad. Her ultimate's also extremely annoying and can change the dynamic of a fight, especially if placed well and if the other team throws nades with it. Overall, Horizon just broken, OP, and desperately needs to be nerfed as we move into Season 9. Alright, so that's going to wrap up my Legends tier list for Season 8 of Apex Legends. It goes without saying, this is of course just my opinion, but this is my overall ranking of the current Legends for the season. On the screen now, I have all of the Legends in each tier, and then ranked from best to worst within that tier from left to right. Let me know in the comment section what you guys think, and whether you agree or disagree with my rankings. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.
Maybe not last one.